Here I'm now being joined by Jim Hockaday, and I said earlier that we would have Jim Hockaday on around 9 o'clock, and then we would have Mr. Helfer come in about 9:15.
We traded.
And we traded identities.
That's all right.
See, what do I know? we were talking about kids and the shop with an officer, and the fact that Batman and Batgirl are going to be over at the Heath Marketplace. So, along that same line, tell me about the open house you had on Saturday.
Saturday we had an open house, so the community with kids, the parents, they could all come in and ask us questions, tour the department, ask questions of the police officers, of the levy that we're trying to get passed to promote or hire more police officers, more corrections officers, a part-time dispatcher or two. Mm-hmm. And it was a good success. We did popcorn, cider, donuts. There were tours. A lot of kids came dressed up because the public library.
They
had
truck or treat
over there
right.
at the same time or an hour later. So it worked out very well. We handed out pumpkins. We had the canine demonstration, the meth and SWAT demos. It was a good time.
Yeah,
very receptive.
I was doing my Saturday morning stint at that time, and I mentioned people go over there and go to truck or treat, but I also said that of course this is all, there could be a problem with rain, and as it turned out, it really wasn't a problem.
It was not a problem, no. A little windy at one time. We had a 10 blow over, but we captured it and weighed it down.
It is October, so
yes,
you gotta have that.
So let's talk a little bit more then about the police levy that's on, what is it, issue 30?
Issue 30.
So how do we go from marijuana issue 3 to issue 30? Are there 20 some in there?
There are.
Are there?
I believe there are more than 30 issues on the
my
ballot
gosh.
This year, depending on where you are in the county.
Right, okay, I see, yeah. So some of those might be New Lyme or something.
I think, well, and there's the senior levy, which I think is 28. I mean, so there are quite a few, and part of that is a byproduct of Ohio law, is a lot of these are non-continuous levies that are required to be renewed.
Right.
And then there are a couple others out there that are new, such as ours.
Is this going to be for a certain amount of time, or is this be going on forever?
This is we put it as an additional continuous, and that's the way we put it out there.
So this is in addition to the levy that's already there.
Correct, and there's a good reason for that. So this is important for people to understand. Most police and fire levies are passed as continuous levies, so they don't need to be reauthorized, every 5 years. I mean, if nothing's changing, there really shouldn't be a need to do that, because it can have dramatic impacts on services if, for whatever reason, one wouldn't pass. There would be a reduction in operations. Our police levy, our current police levy is a lower value levy because it's fixed in time. So in the state of Ohio, if we pass a levy, let's say in 1999, it will not increase with the value of property values. It'll never float. It will only collect that amount that it was collecting in 1999.
So if it was $100,000 and $100,000 funded 4 police officers and 6 cruisers, and in 2015 it's $100,000, and
it will never appreciate. Yeah. The other thing that's important to note in there is, with those continuous levies, the state of Ohio contributed, and they no longer do this, they contributed a portion of that levy back, and I think it's approximately, and I'm speaking off the top of my head, it's approximately 12% of the value of the levy is contributed by the state of Ohio. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is more recent changes in the law is that if we modify that original continuous levy, which I believe is only bringing in close to $180,000, we would actually lose that state share. So we would take it out of, as quote unquote grandfathered, and we're still receiving that state share. So if we went in and said, okay, we don't want to do this as an additional levy, we're going to do it as a renewal or a replacement, it would actually back the state monies out of it. Okay. And it would cost Conneaut taxpayers that additional amount.
Or the police will get less money.
Right. So that's not what we want to do.
No.
So we presented this as an additional levy.
So how much will it bring in?
Well, Now here it
We've
is.
got the multicolored forms
I
here.
have the world famous.
Can we just
Yes,
do-
the world famous John Williams.
John
spreadsheet.
Williams.
So he'll love that I mentioned him. It will generate 562,000. That's what it's estimated. Now we also estimate a delinquency factor in there that is standard. So I believe it's a 95% collection rate. So that really weighs in at $534,000.
Okay.
And I guess, so what do you get for your money is we're talking about adding 2 new police officers full-time, 2 corrections officers full-time, and it's important.
And there are no corrections officers.
There are no
now.
corrections officers. At one time, there were 4 corrections officers. And what most people don't understand is that jail runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are requirements for staffing in that jail that are state required. And we have no ability to not staff the jail. So if we budget cut and we budget cut the corrections officers because we're prioritizing police officers, we are still losing that police officer in staffing the jail. He has to staff the jail.
So have you ever staffed the jail?
I was there on 3rd shift last night. I checked them every hour, and this morning I
Do you have to like sing them to sleep or anything?
No, I don't do that. I don't go that way.
But I talked to
But we had
Mr. Hockaday last week a little bit because I really couldn't believe it, but I was told that like the officers have to times like fold towels or
we do
bedding and all that kind of stuff.
laundry, and this morning, luckily the gentleman last night who worked the jail did the laundry, but I mopped the floors in there today. I served the breakfast, cooked and served the breakfast, and then cleaned up the trash. Of course, go back in there and clean that up. Of course, provided shower supplies, and then during the daytime they serve them lunchtime, take care of the medicine the different inmates receive. If during the day they have to go to court, or sometimes be transferred out to the county and come back for a case, and it's all done by by us rather.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a waste a little bit of police officers compared to what a police officer makes compared to what a corrections officer would make.
And that's right, and that's the point that we're trying to drive home is that we're not utilizing our officers, we're not maximizing our utilization of them. If they're in there serving the jail, we estimate a police officer, and this is a lot of things. I mean, this is their salary, their pension, but it's also, uniforms, everything that would go into that police officer costs the city about $100,000 a year. A corrections officer is far less expensive, and really they come in closer to about $60,000 a year. So we would be almost able to put 2 corrections officers on for the cost of 1 police officer,
Much more efficient.
Much more efficient with our dollars. So the point in driving this home is that we can add those corrections officers, and we said 2 police officers, 2 corrections officers, and some dispatching time. We'll get to dispatching here in a minute. Is what we're trying to do is we're trying to construct an entire shift where we'd have an additional officer available. So by adding that corrections officer, we're taking that police officer who was in the jail last night and putting them back out on the street where they belong so they can do patrols. Probably the number 1 complaint I get is traffic control, running radar, so on and so forth. Well, if we got a break and every hour we have to be back in the jail and sometimes for protracted periods of time, doing anything along those lines is very difficult. And the other, so you'll have last night, on your shift last night, how many officers did you have with you?
We had 3 until 3 a.m. and then just 2 of us. And then when I went into the jail to
So you would go in every once in a while, though? You wouldn't spend the entire 8 hours in the jail?
No, I do go out on the road. I have to come back in every hour, go in and make sure they're all still okay. And then at 5 o'clock I start serving breakfast and getting them the shower supplies. But that takes me off the road.
Yes.
High pulp or low pulp
So-
orange juice?
So essentially, there's that period in time, from 3 and then just past 5 a.m. where we have 1 police officer on. Because the other one's tied up in a jail.
Between 3 and 7 or 5.
And if it's a full moon out there, that's not good.
The inmates are going to suffer.
Yeah.
And,
Well, and the
Yeah.
response time suffer as
Sure.
well, you know,
Oh, yeah.
and particularly to, you know, major issues, fights, where it's going to take more than one officer, you know, on scene. And,
Yeah.
and we find ourselves in these incredibly short-staffed situations, you know, and it raises the level of risk. It raises the danger
does.
for the officer,
Yeah.
you know, to be there by themselves, essentially. That's not a good situation. It is, I don't want to overstate it, but I also don't want to understate it. I mean, they were put in some really life-threatening situations at times, and when we're understaffed because we have to care for the jail, I mean,
Right.
that's an issue. So what we're presenting the public with is, let's look at this option. We'd hire 2 additional police officers, and then in addition to that, we would hire 2 corrections officers.
Okay, we need to go to, got a phone call. Hello, you're on the air. I think.
Yes, I'm calling in regards to this police levy.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that Mr. Hockaday just said that there was a levy on the ballots already that we were paying for. Personally, if we could get the service that we deserve in this city, it would be worth it to pay this levy, but I have problems with my neighborhood. I've had people threaten me with a gun and so on and so forth, and I've never got one bit of satisfaction whatsoever. I'm paying for nothing right now, and why should we continue to keep paying for it? Mr. Hockaday, I appreciate you returning my calls that I asked you to do the past couple of days, and I'll let you respond. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Well, the first thing I would say is, you know, if someone threatens you with violence, you should call 911. They will respond. It's their job to respond. And I'm not aware of situations where they have not responded to emergency phone calls or calls for help.
Don't wait till like later in the day, or I don't know if he did or not, but you don't wait till later or call right away.
I didn't recognize the caller's voice, but I know for a fact that we do respond to every call. That even barking dogs, we still go on those. And the call volume that we have hasn't decreased in the 10 years that I've been there, but yet the number of officers on the road has. And I'll apologize for his situation. I'm not quite sure what happened there, and I'd be glad to talk to him later on third shift when I'm back to work, if he wants to call up when I get back to work. But
I can't remember exact numbers, but I'm thinking that when I started in the news business around here, the Conneaut Police Department was at something like 26 office with chief and sergeants, and for a while there was a lieutenant.
the highest I knew was 24. And when I
Okay.
started 10 years ago, there were 19.
Okay.
And now we're down to 16, including the chief.
Yeah.
And we're still handling the same calls. And our call volume hasn't decreased.
No.
And yet,
You were talking about
the
what's-
drugs have increased.
Yeah.
The crime goes with the drugs. The thefts have increased, and we lost the COs, which weren't involved in that number.
Well, and that's, you know, the picture we're trying to paint here is that, you know, we haven't just lost police officers, we've lost corrections officers, and when we lose those, it compounds the issue because we don't get to stop coming to calls. They must respond to every call, and there's an affirmative obligation for them to do so. And you know, so I don't know what the caller's specific situation is, but absolutely, if there's something we need to address, we'll address it. The levy that's out there now, you know, the continuous levy is de minimis. You know, their budget as a whole, you know, is significant. I mean, you're talking several $1 million. The lion's share of that budget, probably 90% or more, is coming out of the General Revenue Fund.
Right.
And the issue with putting that in the General Revenue Fund is the General Revenue Fund is driven by income tax. And whenever we have either local, regional, or even global fluctuations in our economy, like we saw in 2009, obviously that didn't just affect, you know, a small segment, it affected everybody, but there's
Is
these,
that when the cuts were made?
no, that's when people started losing their jobs because of the downturn in the economy. And what
Right.
happens is that it reverberates. There's a lag that happens. There's actually been a continuous drop in the number of officers going all the way back to the year 2000.
Yeah,
We
I
had that
can
little
believe
bubble in 2001, and you typically tend to see it a couple years in arrears because the income tax and property taxes, income taxes in the same year, but it's arrearage, so it's always lagged a year. So we see the impact in our budget the year after the economic downturn. That's when we see the real bad stuff start to happen. And going back in 2000, we had 20 officers. In 2001, we had 20 officers. 2002, we had 20 officers. And then 3, you see 19. 4, we floated back up to 20. In 2005, 19. 2006, 19. 7, we had 18 officers. 2008, we had 17. 9, 17. 2010, 17. 2011, 12. 13 and 14, we've had 15 officers.
So this isn't going to get us up to some huge amount. This is going to be...
This is trying to float us back to 2009 levels, really, when you look at that. So, and while that's, we might think in our heads that's not that long ago, but we're coming up on, that's 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
there'll still be police officers handling the jail at some time, right? Because you're hiring 2,
yes.
So it's going to relieve things somewhat, but you're still going to have...
During the busiest times.
You may still be bonding with those prisoners on the 3rd shift.
Yes, but our turnaround for the majority of the time of the day, we can drop them off, do the report, get back on the road, which is where the crime is.
Can these corrections officers, can they take people up to court, or does that still require a police officer?
It requires a police officer.
Yeah.
They prefer that we have our weapons in court.
Judge Harris used to once in a while have them, would arraign them by camera. They still does
Judge
DeFranco does that too?
He still uses the video arraignment. However, after that proceeding, pre-trials, prelims,
right.
That's all done upstairs.
Right, and all the people that come in on Monday morning that aren't in the jail.
Right, yes. And and sometimes that's a 10-minute trial, or not a trial, but a hearing. Mm-hmm. Other times we're up there for an hour because the lawyers are talking about negotiating.
Oh, I know.
So
I know.
we could be up there 10 minutes or an hour, and that leaves 1 or 2 guys during the daytime.
I think using, let's say, your shift last night as an example, what percentage of your time was actually able to be spent on a road on an 8-hour shift?
6 hours.
6 hours.
So 2 hours.
So you lost 2 hours to staffing the jail and...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so 25% of my time. And that's on 3rd shift.
Yes.
Day shift and 2nd shift, it's more involved in the jail.
Oh, yeah, because they're all awake.
They're all awake. They may have medical issues. They have court issues. On 2nd shift, there's visitation once a week. It's just a variety of factors that we have to go in there and deal with or handle.
Right. When Mr. Hockaday was on last week, we talked a little bit, and I don't know what I was thinking. I can remember a time when for a while, there was no jail in Conneaut in the 80s. And so I said, well, what happens, I asked Mr. Hockaday off air, what happens on those times when there aren't any prisoners in the jail? Well, that was a rather dumb question on my part, because there are always people in jail, and sometimes people have to be let out, less dangerous ones, right? And
sure.
Others brought in, and then the less dangerous are told, okay, you have to come back and do 3 more days of your sentence or whatever.
They do. We are a 12-day holding facility, and at times we have more than the allotted jail space allows. We have 5 cells, 4 male, 1 female, and a detox cell.
Right.
And at times you have to arrest more than that allows to keep people safe, or they warrant being arrested. And we try and get them out of there so we get back down to our maximum capacity allowed. But people need arrested sometimes, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And they have to prioritize amongst those inmates that they're holding. Who's the most egregious offender.
So, can you let some off because there's somebody more dangerous?
With the judge's permission.
Okay.
He has to see them and give them a bond or whatnot. Give them a furlough to come back in 2 weeks to serve the rest of their time. There are options out there.
So this is like a piece of paper, and if they lose it, they don't get to come back.
It's similar to that.
They always get to come back.
Yes. And one thing is, not only do we have police officers who are not on the road because they're, I don't know, straightening the doilies but maybe not quite that in the prison, but they're working in the prison. they're also dispatching, and we have a call, so let's see. Hello, you're on the air. Hello?
Yeah, Bob, I wanted to make a point again. I called earlier, but I understand the police department, or the situation they're in. I feel sorry for the officers having to do what they have to do that they're not trained to do. But it's been mismanagement from the city council over the years that has caused, I guess, the money to be taken away from the police department. We went and borrowed over $600,000 for that industrial park over there, and the total bill, basically us taxpayers, even though a city didn't pay for it, but state taxpayers are still, we're paying for it, and we're getting, what, $10,000 a year lease on that. I understand Mr. Hockaday wasn't there, but it's been mismanagement and the spending of the city council and the city over the years that's caused this problem now.
Okay,
we don't get anything back from the city.
Okay.
If we have roads, if they have a problem with roads, salting and we're clearing them, they close them for the winter. A skate park we had in the city, and they couldn't control that. So they closed that for the kids when the police station's only 2 blocks away. It takes me, I live on a street that's 1 block long, and I'm only 3 blocks away from City Hall, and it takes them 3 days to plow my roads.
Okay,
You know,
let's
this
let
is the thing.
the city
I
manager.
understand the situation they're in.
Okay, all right. Go ahead and.
Well, I'm certainly not going to, put the words in past councils, but the issue isn't necessarily, investment in certain projects and so on and so forth, and as to whether, those were good investments or not. I'm not going to sit there and hypothesize on that, and I think that detracts from the point. The point is that our cost for these officers continually goes up. Their occupation of the general revenue fund is increasing. So their reliance on the general revenue fund for their operations has been increasing for decades. And
because that old police levy just isn't cutting it.
Correct. And the problem is that, in general, whether you look from 2000 to 2015, whether we're talking about the city of Conneaut, whether we're talking about Ashtabula County, anywhere really in Northeast Ohio, the image is going to be the same. Those revenues, whether they be, property tax revenues, whether they be income tax revenues, have generally declined through that time. And in Conneaut's specific case, the police department's reliance on the general revenue fund has increased. And we also are not able to always, cut our costs the way we would want to. So let's say we reduce our number of officers. Our call volume hasn't reduced. So what happens is overtime increases, because we don't get to say no when this person has to show up for court.
That's what the sheriff said.
Yes.
A lot of times is that you have to have so many people no matter what.
You do. Yeah. And to the caller's point, to an extent, is there is only one way out of the box, and we can pass a levy, but at some point we really need to make that focus economic development. We need to grow our tax base.
Right.
And I think whether you look in the last decade, the last 2 decades, the last 4 decades, when you take kind of that long lens, is Conneaut has been contracting as an economic center. So whether they do it through an industrial park or whatever their choices ultimately are or were, and whether in hindsight we think they were good investments or bad investments, that's a different topic for a different day. But at the end of the day, we do have to start making economic development investments.
So for the people that say, well, the police levy, whatever, this is more of a burden on me, whatever, if maybe down the road we get some economic development, there'll be some industries, there'll be some businesses, we're going to take some of that.
We would be able to breathe a little bit. We would be able to maintain our staff. I mean, the direction I see us going in is kind of the wrong directionality, which is, potentially, staying the same. Our call volume is increasing, which, our costs are increasing is a general trend towards reduction. That is what we're trying to reverse with this. Is let's provide some stability. Let's put some officers back on the street. Let's build ourselves some buffer, so we can continue to provide those operational services. And I would go back to this point: is you are never going to be able to do economic development in a community that has a crime problem.
Yeah.
So if we have, an industrial park over here, but we can't keep, the windows in our businesses in the downtown because rocks are being thrown through them, or there's drugs, or, whether that be methamphetamines or heroin or whatever the case may be, it's that much harder to attract a business with a town that has a police, a crime problem. So, this is almost one of the most fundamental elements, is that we have a quality police force, that we're preventative on crime, that we're looking forward, we're not just stuck in this reactionary stance where we're responding to call, because we can't put anybody out on the road long enough to do actual traffic control. And traffic control is a pretty important element.
Well,
in
also I was
policing.
thinking, like, that could bring in a little bit of income too. If you had an officer who could, it doesn't.
Well, not really. If you had a $150 ticket, I'd be surprised the city sees $40.
Yeah.
Most of it goes to indigent defense funds and court operations, court costs. It doesn't actually go to the police department, and certainly not the general revenue fund. It's limited in terms of what that does. But
What about the wage scale?
Well, it's important. I want to make this point here. Is it's important that police officers be able to do traffic control, and that doesn't mean just handing out tickets.
No, it's more about safety.
It's about safety. It's about slowing people down. But most crimes, the lion's share, over 90% of crimes, are related to a vehicle in some way, shape, or form. So it allows that officer to come up. Why are you speeding? Do you have drugs in the car? Is there a weapon in the car? What else is going on in this car?
And you see from reports that happens a lot, that there are drugs in the car.
Absolutely.
Are weapons.
I mean, this is kind of an idiosyncratic example, but when you look at how they catch the mob boss, it's because he had a broken taillight and he got pulled over, and hey, look what else he's got in the car. And that's really, particularly with the more mobile methamphetamine and heroin and all that kind of stuff, they're traveling. So by being out there and being proactive, we can actually, be more preventative with these items rather than running to the call after the problem's already occurred.
And you said proactive, and that's the key, that we like to be out there looking for the crime. And currently we're almost just reactive. We have very limited amount of time that we can go out there and try and find things.
And I wanted to come back to another point, because we talked about corrections, but we didn't talk about dispatch. Now, we do have dispatchers for every shift. The problem is we have 5 full-time dispatchers and a couple.
No, just 4 full-time.
4 full-time
and 1 part-time on Saturday mornings.
So we actually have some uncovered shift work right now, but there are times when people are allowed to take vacations. Of course, people get sick. There are injuries, whatever the case may be. People have time away from work, and that exacerbates the situation even worse, because now not only may we have lost a police officer to the corrections officer kind of position in the jail, but also to dispatch. So if we go back to that contingent of 15 officers, which equates to 3 per shift.
You got 1 on dispatch.
You got 1 on dispatch.
We got 1 in the jail.
And 1 on the road.
Yeah.
And
that happens a lot?
Not as much as it used to, but it's still happening, yes. Where a guy between 3 and 7 or 3 and 11 in the morning has to sit at the desk.
I mean, you hear, well, they should be more efficient and all, but when you've lost that many officers since 2000, there's only so much efficiency can take over. And
you're almost at bare bones, is what it is.
We're actually getting so low on staffing that we're becoming more inefficient, because we're still having to staff these other positions. It's detracting from operations. And what is also happening is there's overtime. And our overtime has continued to increase year over year in the last couple of years, because we lack adequate staffing. in a lot of ways. I mean, it's to the point where a lot of the overtime is truly unwanted overtime by the police officers, that they do it because they have to do it because we don't have another choice for it. But it's excessive, and even the officers don't. I mean, it's not like, hey, great, more overtime. No, they want to spend time with their families too.
My wife would like me home. Yes.
Yes. So,
and then also you also have things like D-Day and that sort of thing, where you have like every officer's out there.
And the fireworks, yes.
Right.
and I would say, and maybe this is my own personal perspective, and whether or not the police officers agree with this or not, and having worked with Geneva on the Lake, and looking at how we did events there, 4th of July, Thunder on the Strip, Memorial Day, Labor Day, there are major holidays and major event weekends throughout the summer, is what people don't realize is Geneva on the Lake was much better staffed than Conneaut is for these events.
I will tell you this, that if you're going down Lake Road in Saybrook and you're going into Geneva on the Lake, slow down, because I found that out.
Well, and I'll give you an example. Say Thunder on the Strip. Most people say, oh, well, Geneva on the Lake, they have 5 full-time officers, including their chief, 2 part-timers. But there's also usually a contingent of up to 50 auxiliaries. Usually it's around 40 auxiliary officers. And for those major holiday weekends, there's usually, particularly on the hot shifts, there may be as many as 20 officers on duty for that specific shift. And you compare that with Conneaut, obviously we can't even put all 15 out
and
there.
there's a lot more area to Conneaut than
Correct.
there's Geneva on the Lake.
Absolutely. And there's also area, but you look at the D-Day event, and I would say in a lot of ways it probably is better attended than some of those events, and we're incredibly undermatched in those scenarios. I mean, where we don't even have 1 police officer per 1,000 people attending the event.
And the nationwide average used to be 2 officers per 1,000 people for the population. So we're almost at 13,000 in the city. We should about have 24.
Yeah.
And we're at a third less.
Yes.
Let's take a break and we can get into, I also want to talk how much this is going to cost, and if we can get into just a little bit about the cameras that you guys have.
Oh, sure.
So give us an idea how much this is going to cost people.
Well, again, I have this wonderful John Williams spreadsheet here, and I don't know.
No, I'll take this. Hopefully it'll be quick. Hello, you're on the air. Yes. Do you want to? I don't know what that is, but go ahead.
But anyway,
somebody escaped your jail there, I think.
Yeah. Is for, and I'll do this at a couple different values. So let's say $100,000 in home value. This is what the auditor would evaluate the full value of your home on an annual percentage. That $100,000 would boil out to about $105 a year, and that's if you don't receive the homestead exemption. If you do, it's $78.75. So monthly it would be $875 without the exemption, and with the exemption it would be $6.56 a month. Which I think is very affordable. Now, to use a more realistic example, the average home in Conneaut, I believe, has about $78,000 value. So I'll do it at the $80,000 value here. So that would be $84 annually without the exemption, or $7 monthly without the exemption. If you do have the homestead exemption on that $80,000 home, it would be $57.75 a year, or $4.81 a month. So this isn't, these aren't enormous numbers. And when you compare the property tax rates in general, the effective millage rates of Conneaut to similar communities around the county with police forces, full-time police forces, our property tax rates are generally lower. They're certainly much lower than some of the other coastal areas, almost to the effect of 10 mils lower. So I think this is, an affordable amount, particularly what you get for it, and there's value. So this is what we're aiming for, as
So you're going to be getting more police officers than you would because you're going to get them because they're not going to be in the jail, and you're going to get more police officers because you're going to be able to hire more police officers.
Yes.
Which is similar to what Ashtabula did, was it a year or two ago, when they
Yes.
passed a very similar type of
They
law?
did, yes. They were very
Yes.
fortunate for that.
And they've added a lot of police officers, and specifically to address some of their issues in their downtown.
It's like the armed robberies are having every evening now.
Hey, it's real, and you know, in the words of County Prosecutor Nick Irochi, is, you know, Conneaut has a huge meth manufacturing issue, and it's only overshadowed by the massive heroin issue.
Yeah.
And it's true, and we do have issues, and we need to be able to address those issues.
So can you talk a little bit about the camera? Because we've got about 3 minutes before.
Sure. Last time I spoke with you on the
Right.
Facebook message, we had started to institute the body cameras. They were funded. It was a great program. We now have them to, I think, 85% of our officers are wearing them. I think we're missing 2. We wear them wherever we go out. We turn them on before we get out of the cruiser. We bring them back, and we can upload the video into our report, and it shows an unbiased witness of whatever the transaction that we had with the public. Good, negative, or bad, or
I
positive.
bet officers are happy about it.
You know, it should be. We should be happy about it, as well as the community.
Right,
The citizens
yeah,
should
but
be.
I'm
It
sure
really
that
is.
there's a lot of he said, she said, and no officer, I never told that officer that. And,
Officers used to be called on the carpet a couple times, you know, occasionally. Just, well, I got a complaint on this officer, you know, on this traffic stop, he treated me rudely. Well, now they can watch the video and see if that was true or not. And if it is, it'll be dealt with, but I don't know of any circumstances where that's happened. It's really a great program, and I enjoy wearing it. It's my backup, and it hopefully people do notice them there, and it keeps them honest and civil.
Right. So they're a little bit more on good behavior.
I would hope so. I would hope so.
I mean, you know, I know maybe nationally there was probably some talk that, you know, it's not something that police officers wanted, and I have yet to meet that officer.
Yeah.
That says we don't want these. They are a tremendous prosecutorial tool. You know, it does document everything, and it does document it fairly. In the sense that it's not just what the officer's perception of it was. It's no, here's the video, and this is what this person actually said. This is what this person actually did. And you know, it will, you know, as much you know, prosecute as it would exonerate as well. You know, if someone didn't do something, well, it's not on the video. They didn't do this, so it goes both ways. It is just that accurate portrayal of what happened, and it's an excellent policing tool, and I'm glad we were able to utilize them.
Bob, if I may just make a plea to the viewing public out there, if you have any questions regarding the levy, contact your nearest officer. We're always working out there on the road. If we
Right,
can.
you're out there in the
Just
public.
wave
so-
us down, and we'll answer any questions that we can, or send you in the right direction to do so.
Okay.
We do need help.
All right, we are out of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Helfer, Jim Hockaday, and we'll be back tomorrow.